Namaste, this is Aditya and welcome to Shankar MarkTech channel. Today, I am going to introduce you to the topic of OSGI services. First, we are going to discuss what are the problems which OSGI services are trying to solve. Then we will see specifically the OSGI services in AEM context, and then we will try to understand in what scenarios we need to use OSGI services and what is the syntax of doing that. This video is part of AEM tutorials for beginners playlist, the link for which I'll give it out in the description box. Please check it out if you are interested. If you are liking the videos which I'm doing, please hit on that like button and please subscribe to my channel. Let's get started with the presentation. Okay, so first let's try to understand the problem which OSGI services are going to solve. Okay, so this we'll understand by taking a non-AEM example. Let us suppose we are developing a e-commerce application in Java. Okay, and in the e-commerce application we have different modules, right, or different functional areas like accounts, products, orders, shipping, service. So all these are different functional areas for which we will have to write the code. Let us suppose this entire e-commerce application is part of one Git repository, and also let us suppose all this entire application is wrapped as one jar. Okay, so then what happens is, if this jar, a bulkier or big jar, is being deployed into the production environment, and if there is any issue in the accounts module, and if the jar crashes, then the entire functionality will not work. Like, though the problem is with accounts, the products, orders, service, shipping, everything will not work because it is part of one jar. And because of all this application being in one repository also, there are multiple problems which will arise. Like, for example, a simple compilation issue. Let us suppose we are trying to deploy the entire code into our dev environment, and if there is any compilation issue in the orders code, in the orders functionality, because of that error, none of the other code also will be pushed into dev environment. And let's suppose if we want to move from dev to QA environment, then there needs to be a lot of the planning which needs to be done. Like, for example, in the dev there may be some partly cooked code in the products and partly cooked code in a service which cannot be moved to QA, but maybe orders, accounts and shipping team might be ready to move to QA. Because of these two teams, the other teams also has to hold on to their code from moving to QA. Okay, so all these practical problems are there because of having the entire code in one Git repository or having this entire code as part of one jar. So OSGI services aims to solve such kind of problems by creating a modularized application. Let's see how it solves this. So this is how the solution will look like in the OSGI situation. Okay, so we can have these functionalities like accounts, products, service, shipping, orders in separate Git repositories. So we could create one Git repository for accounts, one for products, one for service, and so on. Okay, so the advantage of that is, the advantage of this approach is the developer teams can individually start working on these repositories, and whenever they are complete, they can just move the code into the dev without having dependency upon the other repositories. So if this repository is complete, then this code can be merged into the development environment. Whenever this is complete, this code can be merged, and so on and so forth. And even in the application, all these code bases are not being deployed as a one single jar. Instead, it will be deployed as multiple jars in this application. Okay, so accounts has its own jar, products has its own jar, and so on and so forth. So if there is any crash in this module, like products module, account, service, shipping, orders module will still be working. Only the products module will not work. So this is the advantage of this OSGI service. But the point here we should note is all these jars are running in one single JVM. Okay, so this is not equivalent to the microservices architecture, wherein we have all these accounts, products and all these functionalities deployed on a separate servers or separate JVMs, and also they need not have a separate databases as in the case of microservices. This OSGI services can be extended to the microservices, but that's a different topic altogether. But we should know that in AEM scenario or in general OSGI framework scenario, all these jars are being deployed into one JVM and they are all working on one server. Now let's see the AEM example and try to understand how OSGI is being of our advantage in Adobe Experience Manager. So these are the various modules which we have, right? So the Apache Sling. So Apache development team has developed the Apache Sling framework and they have deployed into the OSGI framework. Then Adobe team will take the references of this Sling framework and they have implemented their own classes, like for example asset classes and some other classes which are specific to Adobe. Okay, so then comes our project modules, wherein we can take the references from the Apache Sling module or the Adobe CQ module and we will implement our own code. Now all these codes are being deployed into the OSGI framework as a multi-module application. So this is how OSGI framework is of to our advantage in AEM example. Okay, so if you observe, this Apache Sling developers is a different team. Adobe developers are different team and our project developers are a different team altogether. So they have developed their own code and these people have developed their own code and individually they have checked into one OSGI framework. And all these modules are being deployed into one JVM to make the entire web application work. So now we told that we use certain references of Apache Sling framework in our project modules and even some of the Adobe classes in our project modules. But if we see, these jars are different jars, right? They are in the different namespace and they are all different jars. So if we have to refer some of the code from Adobe CQ module in our project modules, then how do we do it? So the interaction between these different modules will happen through something known as OSGI services. Okay, so OSGI services has three parts to it. The first part is OSGI interface and then OSGI service implementation and service injection. If we go back to this example, now here we can assume that there is a OSGI interface layer and here again there is a OSGI interface layer. So what is an interface? Interface is the medium through which you talk to the other entity. Like for example, user interface, right? We use user interface to talk to the machine, right? So similar example. So there is an interface through which these two can communicate. And there is an interface here also through which these two can communicate. So every module has a service and a service will have an interface through which other modules can interface with it. So then we have something called as interface implementation. So what is interface implementation? Okay, so to understand that we need to talk about interface in more detail. Okay, so interface is nothing but a prototype. So what do we mean by that is, let us suppose we have two phones and one is Samsung phone and another is Nokia phone. And let us suppose I wanted to create an interface for these phones. Okay, so then how do I create such an interface? So how do I think is, what is common between these two phones? Like any phone, right, it has to switch on and off. So what are the common functionalities which a phone could have? We can switch on the phone, switch off the phone. We should be able to click on the phone, navigate through. So all these are the common functionalities which we have, right? So all those common functionalities names I will define as part of an interface. So I will say phone interface and I will define the function, say on. So just the function name I will define, the method name I will define. I will not write any code inside that. I will just say on and I will say off, right? And I will say navigate. So these are the standard functions which I will define. Okay, so just the names I will define, not the implementation. So now what happens is, the way in which we should switch on the Samsung phone differs from the way in which we should switch on the Nokia phone, right? So maybe the Samsung phone has a button somewhere which I have to locate and the Nokia phone has a button somewhere, right? So that implementation part as to how exactly the switch on happens might differ, but the common functionality is any phone we should be able to on it or off it, right? So those functionalities will not differ. So that common functionalities, whatever is there, will be part of the interface, and only the method name declaration will be there. So we'll say these are the methods which are there as part of this phone functionality or phone interface. So that is called as an interface. And as we see the implementation, as I told, how exactly the phone has to be switched on, like Samsung phone has to be switched on, differs from how exactly a Nokia phone has to be switched on, right? So that implementation part is where we will write actual code. Okay, so we'll define a class which implements this interface, and then we will define on method, and we'll write the code as to what exactly should happen there. Then what is the service injection? Service injection is the way through which we call these interfaces. So let us suppose I am in a servlet code and I want to use a service, let us suppose. Then what I'll do is I will do a service injection. So how exactly we'll do it and what is the syntax of it, we'll take it in the later part of this course. These are the three areas which we need to focus on whenever we are talking about OSGI services. So till now we have understood how exactly OSGI services are useful in AEM example, and we talked about Apache Sling, Adobe CQ and project modules. But is there any scenario in which we should be using OSGI services in our project modules? So that is what we are going to discuss now. So this example I have taken it from the Amazon, and let us suppose a similar kind of the page we want to create for our e-commerce application using Adobe Experience Manager. So if we observe carefully, here you have all the images, right? Product images, and here you have the product title, reviews, right? And you have offers, and below you have the description also. Okay, and here you have the price. So if you think carefully, all these things are coming from different places. So for example, these images might be coming from our Adobe Experience Manager, and these product details like product title might be coming from our commerce system, and these reviews might be coming either from the commerce system or from CRM or from any other system wherever we have decided these reviews should be stored. And these offers also might be coming from the offer management system. So what I'm trying to point out here is we have multiple systems involved in creating a single page. If we have to implement this in our AEM, right? So we can choose something like this. Okay, so let us suppose we have a component UI. Okay, so here we have the product title and the reviews, right? So this could be one of the component, right? And then we can say we can put a one H1 or H3 here and show the product title, and here we can show the product review basis on the stars. Okay, so we can write some UI code which can render the UI like this. All this we can do. So all that code will go as part of the component UI. Okay, and this component UI somehow should get these details, right? What is the title, what is the review, and all that. So all these details you will get it from the Sling model. But then from Sling model, how does the Sling model get all those details? Because this product title and all those are not present as part of the AEM, right? So we can write an API call from the Sling model, a API call to the commerce system, and let us suppose our commerce system is Magento. Okay, so through IL layer it will go and give a call to the e-commerce system and fetch all the product related details, and it will ultimately put all those into the variables, and this Sling model will pass on the variables into the component UI, and component UI will render it. So this is one of the simple thing which we can do, right? In the simple way we can write a code like this. But there are few problems here. So what are those? So the first problem is with our skill sets. It is very hard to get a full stack developer skill set. Okay, we can get the skill set who are good at JavaScripting, and we can get some freshers who are good at creating the Adobe components, and we can have the people who are good at writing the Java code. But getting a person who can do end-to-end is very difficult. Okay, so that is one of the problem which we have. And the second problem which we could have is, let us suppose now in current scenario we have the Magento implementation. E-commerce is our Magento system. Let us suppose the organization has made a decision to move from Magento to Shopify. So then what happens is all our front-end code also needs to change. Like all the logic which we have written in the Sling model, we need to change it, and we need to again it might also have again some impact on the component UI. Okay, so these are all the issues which we might face at later point of stage once the development is complete after down the line like 3 or 4 years. So how can we avoid these two issues? Okay, so we can use OSGI services. Okay, so then how does the implementation look like in the OSGI service? Okay, this is how it will look like. Okay, so we have the component UI and the Sling model. Okay, so now the logic would be that the product title and description, whatever we are getting right in the Sling model earlier through an API call directly from the Magento system, that instead we'll get it through the OSGI service. Okay, so now again OSGI service will have a service interface, right? So this service interface might have one method called get title. Okay, so get product title, like that there could be one method in the service interface, and the model will call only that method which is get title or get product title. Okay, and it doesn't care about the implementation part of it. Okay, so is that implementation connecting to the Magento system or Shopify system or any other system? It doesn't care. All it cares is about that name of that method which is get product title. So let us suppose later on stage this Magento is getting changed to Shopify. The implementation might change, but the method name get product title will be same, so that there will not be any impact on my UI, right? Model always will call that get product title, and once it gets the product title, it does whatever it has to do, and it doesn't care about how the implementation works, whether it is connecting to Magento or Shopify. So this way we have solved one problem, which is what if at later point of stage something else changes, right? We have created an abstraction out of it. Okay, so the second point is regarding the developers, right? Now you have the front-end developers who can focus only on the front end, right? For example, the component UI, to create it you need the HTML and CSS and JavaScript, right? So you can have the dedicated HTML, CSS, JavaScript developers there, and you can have some AEM developers, be it freshers, right? To create the component and Sling models. Because in the Sling models all you need to do is @value map and OSGI service, and then inject the services and get the variables. That's it. There is no hi-fi code which we are writing here. Only we are just getting a few variables from the service and few variables from our CRXDE, right? So those things anybody can do it, even fresher can do it, right? So once the CSS and this component creation is done, the actual backend stuff we can put the actual Java developers and get this backend done, right? So in that way we can divide our team nicely, and we can make a big implementation work from this. Okay, so these are the advantages of having the OSGI service. So to see the syntax of it, this is how it will look like. Okay, so if we just go here, okay, so here is the interface, right? We say public interface and we give the interface name, and as I told, we just declare our method here. So see here there is only declaration, right? In this interface there is only declaration. Okay, and in the implementation part, the same method, what we do is like merge data with XDP template. So here the actual code is written. Okay, so this is the implementation part. This is what I was talking about, the interface and implementation. So the syntax in detail we'll take up in our next videos, but this is what I wanted to just give a glimpse of it. Like this is how it will look like. So if you see here, here we have declared the interface, and if you come to the implementation, here if you see the class, we are saying class this IMPL implements, we are saying implements this interface, which means that this is nothing but this implementation, right? Okay, so then what happens is our IDE, whether it is Eclipse or IntelliJ, what it does is it will enforce this override. Like it will definitely ask for you to define these methods. Like if you don't define the code for these methods, it will give you an error. Okay, you must define this. Okay, so that's how we say that this is an interface through which the UI can talk to, right? Because these names doesn't change. This is just like a contract between the backend and front end. Okay, so it is an interface or a contract through which both can communicate to each other without having any dependency or without having to know each other's implementation. So the way in which we will import this services into our servlet is using the @reference annotation. Okay, so if we have to call a service from a servlet, we use this @service annotation, and if we have to call a service through a Sling model, we'll use this @OSGI annotation, both of which we'll see it in our next videos. That's it for today. Jai Hind.